Wow, what an electric crowd. We got people standing in the back. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with us. We have an amazing conversation ahead of us today talking about the front office, the business of women's sports, with three women who know it better than anyone else. All the way to my far right, we have Kim Stone, the CEO of the Washington Spirit, representing my hometown of Washington, D.C. Next to her, we have Jess Smith, the president of the WNBA Golden State. And then to my immediate right, we have Clarke, the CEO of New York Liberty. So why don't we just get started with news of the day? So Jess, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, we are all anxiously awaiting this rebrand. Do you have any details you can share with us about what to expect and how you're thinking about it?
I mean, it's going to be great, of course.
Obviously.
The way we're thinking about it, right? So we wanted to really take a step back and understand who this brand was going to be, what it means at this point in time. And so when you look at what's happening in women's sports, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of Angel City from day one, so I have a pulse on the feeling of that and how fans and partners come together to support that. When you think through women's basketball and you think through the Bay Area, you know, the Bay Area leads the world often in being progressive and innovative at the same time, where doing what everyone said was impossible. So the way that we're thinking about that is, you know, we're the place where myths are made, right? Like, it's not impossible, everything's possible in how we're approaching it. And then as we thought through how to take that and make it inclusive of what our brand will be, you know, of course, we want Warriors fans to love it. You know, they're an incredible fan base, a global fan base, and, you know, have been following, you know, a dynasty for quite some time. We also want every women's sports fan to relate to it and to feel like it includes them in some capacity. And lastly, we want to make sure we're inviting in the audience that we know is waiting for us to invite them in, right? We see that often in women's sports right now. When COVID happened, all of us really shifted as a society, not only Gen Z and younger, but all of us thought through, where do I spend my time? Where do I spend my money? You know, how do I support this? And when you invite folks into a brand that allows them to watch something, spend money, and then see change with it, it's really powerful. And that's collective, but for us in the Bay Area, that's how we've approached how we want this brand to feel to people.
And then as a follow-up to that, do you expect the brand to be different, similar to the men's team? Do you want to be distinct?
You're going for it.
We're going for it.
I love it. No, I mean, that was the difficult. You know, there are, I think, you know, there will be some subtle nods, I think, that invite all of those groups in the right way. But the WNBA and Angel City, you know, and many other brands have done a great job of, when you see a brand, making sure that it's its own, you know, and I think that's really powerful. When somebody's wearing a W hoodie, you're immediately like, ooh, I like that person, right? Or like, that person believes in a better, more equal society, and so do I, and there's like a nod to being a part of that crew, so we have to accomplish that in the market as well.
Kim just touched on something which is sort of the magical ethos of the Bay Area specifically. You've been in so many different markets, Miami, New York, Washington, D.C. How do you think about building community around these franchises by geography? Is it something you have to consider? Does it not matter at all?
That's a great question, and it was in the Bay Area as well. So I was saying, when I was in those areas, I was a facility general manager, and you could tell the difference in the region by the top-selling alcoholic beverage, right? So in Miami, it's like a double Bacardi rum, right? In San Francisco, it's wine, right? In Long Island, when I was at UBS Arena, it was beer. So these are not my opinions, these are data. So let's use the data to decide. And so what we see is that you do have regional differences, you have regional preferences. And so as you're building your community, you have to understand the community, you have to appeal to the things that really motivate and inspire them. And I am loving DC. I've only been there 3 months and really loving DC. It is a networking capital, as you would imagine, because of the politics behind it. But the entire sports teams, all the other professional teams, have rolled out the red carpet to me. I know many of them just because I've been in the business for so long, but they are so excited and genuinely, authentically helping us as a women's sports to make our mark in the DC market. So I have just loved the DC market, love that there are regional differences. You do have to pay attention to them. It does matter, you know, what and how we'll build community in DC is different from what and how Jess will do it how Keia will do it. But it's exciting. But there's just this. I'm so thrilled to be in this. It's not a moment we're having; it's a movement that we're having right now, and this has just been excellent.
And just to quickly follow up, because I'm curious, what would be the number one selling drink in DC?
So now that I'm back into women's sports, it's Pepsi and water.
Wow. Speaks a lot to my market, let me tell you. Keia, one of the things that Kim was just highlighting is you have to build community where they are. What are descriptors of the Liberty community? How are you thinking about creating a fan experience for them specifically?
Yeah, really interesting for us. And hello, New York. I have to start by saying that. Obviously, we're the New York Liberty. We've played at MSG. We played at the Prudential Center. We played in Westchester County Center. And now we find our home at Barclays Center. And I think how we've built the community and the intentionality around what the game experience is really telling of the surrounding people of Brooklyn and New York City. And that's what we've incredibly leaned into. The things that are the vibe of Brooklyn, the legacy of the New York Liberty, the tenets of the Statue of Liberty, equity and equality and freedom, all of those things sort of melted together were the basis and the foundation of why the team exists. And bringing that to life in Brooklyn has really been the most fun I've ever had throughout these almost 18 years that I've been working in the WNBA. And just to see the response, young and old, from all diverse communities, it's just been a melting pot. And I've always known that to be what the WNBA was about, but to see it in aggregate and with so much growth has just been an amazing, amazing experience.
You have a unique experience, Keia, because you came up to be the CEO through marketing, which is not always the case. Sometimes it's people who came up through, a more financial lens, sometimes sales. How does your experience as a marketer inform the way that you approach the CEO role?
Yeah, I mean, everything about what we're doing is first and foremost to make sure, we're taking care of our players and that they're having a great and wonderful experience, but how we elevate and amplify them to the community is ultimately going to be why people fall in love. So colors matter, venue matters, music matters. That's all marketing, in my opinion. Our video, our content, our social media, these are all areas where when you're moving around and bouncing around a little bit, it's really hard to find your footing. But to be established and be where we are now, marketing is pretty much touching every single thing that we do and informing every single decision that we make.
In terms of marketing, Jess, you have a unique opportunity ahead of you. You're starting from scratch. You need to build something new. What are things that you've had to do in order to build awareness around what this franchise is going to be that we might not have considered or realized?
Well, that's Kimberly Veal's job, so she's here. But I mean, the reality is with a new brand, with a timeline to launch, you have to be relentless in what you want to accomplish. And for us, that will be making sure we have user acquisition or fan acquisition and driving revenue. And doing both of those things allow you more opportunity to do more. Now, how you do those things is what really matters and how marketing plays a point in that, who you're inviting in, how you are seeing the spaces you show up in, balancing what that region looks for, and then also what your national footprint and awareness is. So, but marketing drives revenue. Fans drive revenue. So you have to think of both pieces of that equation with everything that you're building. If something seems really cool and fun, but doesn't allow you to reach an audience that reinforces your brand or invites somebody new into it, it's not worth the investment, right? So you do have to be really aware of how you're spending your time and energy, especially with a brand new company with a limited timeline in front.
Just to follow up quickly on sort of where you're making investments, some franchises have this unique thing to balance where you have superstar athletes and then a brand itself that you need to promote. How are you thinking, Jess, as you're heading into this, building a brand, about that balance?
Our community is our content. And I think that is something really beautiful about a year without our team formed yet. Number one, they get to be a part of everything that we build. So as we hire a GM, as we hire their staff this first year, the first head coach in history, they're going to be out in the community, getting to know them, showing up to the same places that they show up to. But we also have an opportunity to now show what Oakland is like and the beautiful lens that we get to have every day, and having our practice facility there, going to our favorite spots in San Francisco and San Jose, and highlighting the incredible diverse community that exists that is also our fan base. And so there's a lot of stories to tell. I get asked that question often, what why are you hiring a full social team? Like, what are you actually going to do? And I was like, oh, there's so much to do. And our partners that come on board early too, they'll be a part of that storytelling in a powerful way. But we get to establish that base, and then we get players that come in, and they're just going to reinforce that in a really powerful way with their own likeness.
And then maybe let me throw this back to Keia. Speaking of that dynamic, how do you figure out how to work with brands? Because sometimes you'll have a brand that wants to work with a Brianna Stewart or a big player themselves, but they also want to work with the team. Are you going at these opportunities together, separate?
Yeah, there are definitely guardrails that come into play. Endorsement deals are completely separate of what the team deal and what the team partnership looks like, but there's definitely a dance that occurs. We have wonderful relationships with most of the agents that work with our players. We do have a handful of superstars, so I'm speaking from experience on what that dance looks like. But really, one is always helping the other. One is always lifting the other. So, when we are featuring multiple people, all the starters, whole team, when we're doing an initiative, when we're out in the community, those are things that ultimately help the New York Liberty. And at the same time, it's going to drive fandom, and somebody's going to lock in on one specific player. How we can support that really comes down to, the parameters of what the initiative is, but it's also about being in direct communication with their representation, direct communication with the athlete themselves, understanding what's important to them. It's much easier on the community side, quite frankly. From a social responsibility standpoint, probably, it was before we even had this roster right now. We sort of got away from establishing what we wanted our community work to look like and then telling players, this is what you're doing, and instead inviting them into the conversation, asking them, what do you want your legacy to be? What would be important for you to do while you're here in New York and while you're in market for the season? What do you want to do outside the season that can connect to what we're doing in season? And once we started to ask those questions, it becomes a much more symbiotic relationship where they're excited and even bringing ideas to us. When I think about the Commissioner's Cup this past season, we had worked together with our players to a certain extent on who the recipient of those funds were going to be. And when we won the Commissioner's Cup and we were all delighted and excited, a couple of the players came to us and said, actually, next season, can we sit down and have a meeting and talk about what the next initiative is going to be? We really felt good about playing for that community partner, and we've definitely gone to those lengths this season to include them in that conversation. It's all communication, and I think that makes it much more authentic for the partner. We're going to get richer and more enthusiastic input when they're a part of the conversation, but also when the partner gets to stress what's important to them from a brand match standpoint.
Quickly to follow up on the brand standpoint, are there certain brands that you think are jumping on the opportunity to partner with women's sports versus ones that are not? And why do you think there is a dynamic in which certain brands are sitting on the sidelines?
Yeah, I can't speak for who's sitting on the sidelines, but I would definitely say it feels good for the phones to ring inbound, certainly. And whether you're excited about this particular moment, I hope they understand and we're conveying to them that it is a movement. This is the tipping point. This is for the long haul now, and it's our jobs to really showcase the value in longevity. I think, this is not fly-by-night. It's not a helicopter event, and I think we've actually had the opportunity to prove with some of our partners, big and small, that we can do custom activations, that we can do things that meet your customer where they are, that we can do things together that really generate goodwill, but mostly good business sense, driving revenue, driving awareness, all the things that a partnership is supposed to attain. Proving that out is really what we're focused on. So, the people who are sitting on the side, perhaps they're just not aware of what some of the opportunities are, and I think it's our jobs to knock on those doors if the phone isn't going to be ringing inbound. But that's, an easier conversation with all this lift that we have right now.
And I just have to jump in there because I think there's a level of lack of awareness or understanding to give credit to people looking to learn, but there's also an inaccuracy in valuations. And I think that the models that have existed to date don't take into account the value set that you get from the consumer we spoke about earlier with women's sports. And that's worth something. When you sponsor women's sports, whether someone's a consumer of it or not, they're seeing your brand in a different light, in a way that drives our society to be better and unlocks a different buying power than simply impressions. And there really hasn't been a consistent model yet that can showcase that. But the women's sports teams and leaders that are investing in staff and resources and execution are able to really push those valuations higher. So it's only a matter of time. But I think they're looking at bad data. They're looking at data like one-dimensional when that's not how consumers are intaking any type of media anymore. And so you really have to look at it in a different circle to understand the true value set of it.
And do you think that's on you to be doing that education?
I take it on. I mean, I think it's on all of us, to be totally honest. It's people showing up in a room like today. It's people reading what they should be. It's people watching and taking in the product and knowing what it means. When you sit at a Liberty game, for those of you who have been in market, or an Angel City game, or obviously a DC game, there's a feeling there. You walk in those arenas and stadiums and your shoulders drop. You feel safe, you feel seen, you still feel just as passionate about the refs being terrible, because they are. Just kidding, I don't even think I'm allowed to say that anymore. Sorry, Kimberly. But there's a feeling in those venues that you can't replicate. And I think when people turn on the opportunity to experience that, there's something that unlocks in their brain of like, oh, this is how I want people to feel around my brand. When they walk into the store and think about what their purchasing decisions are, this is what I want them to think about.
And I just want to add on there. So a real example of exactly what Jess is saying. So we had 15,000 at our game on Saturday, and then we always do post-event surveys. And Net Promoter Score, is the metric that we all look at, and to tell about your brand health. And we score 80 on our Net Promoter Scores. I think Nordstrom's is in the 60s. Just to give you an example of what Jess is saying, these experiences at the events that we're all putting on are just at that level. And very well said that it's on everybody, including the brands, to understand and look through a little bit different lens at the value here.
Thinking about how we present value differently, when you're leading a women's franchise, there are so many different types of things you must consider that I don't think if you didn't put your neck out, anyone would consider for you. For example, does the performance centers and the training equipment adequately meet the needs of these athletes? This was a huge issue, right, with the Olympics training. Kim, how are you thinking about that in Washington? Is this an issue, or is it something that you actually think the community and the sports community understands?
So this is what Michelle Kang, our owner, is all about. She is about training females as females and she's creating what's called the Performance Innovation Center. So if you know Michelle, she's got 2 teams in Europe as well as the Spirit, and she's looking to purchase additional teams. And then she's creating this center of excellence, and it's all about women's health and training women as women. And most of the research that's done on women is extrapolated from men's research. So there's only 6% of sports data science is done on women. So 94% of the data people are using to train women is based on small men. And we're not small men, right? So this is what Michelle's legacy is, and this is what she is very focused on, is making sure. So we have hired 10 PhDs. They're specialists in sleep. They're specialists in wellness. They're specialists in menstrual cycles. They're specialists in mental health. And she's putting all of this together so that we can learn and make sure that we're training to the unique needs of the athletes. So an example is that our goalkeepers, one of our goalkeepers, they know from just watching her biology, is that when she gets into beginning her menstrual cycle, and I know that's an uncomfortable thing to say in a room, but when we all have it. So when the goalkeeper is in her cycle, they train differently. Like they pull her. It doesn't matter what games are coming up or whether it's in the playoffs. They train her differently because it keeps her better trained and keeps her injury reduction down. So this is definitely something that we're super excited about and that Michelle is just passionate about.
I think to add on to that, there are so many inequities in women's lives. And of course, inherently, when your athletes are women, there is a lot that comes to the forefront around your responsibility to make sure that whoever they are in the multidimensional way that they, bring themselves to this world, that you create environments that make them feel safe and celebrated at all times. And health seems like it should just be of course.
The bar.
Right? You're expected to perform at this elite level at all times. Of course. So I love the work that Michelle does. She's such a leader. Also the best dressed person I've ever seen in my life, but
She is. Very well dressed. All of you ladies, everyone here today has been very fashionable. We just have a few minutes left, and so I wanted to give the audience sort of a view from the top. You run a franchise. Keia, what does game day look like, and how do you operate differently on game day than you would in any other day running the franchise?
Wonderful question. I love this. First of all, my uniform is my blazer. My team who's here can attest to that. But I think for me, game time is showtime. Although I'm not going to get on the court and tip off, this is our moment. This is our moment to create a memory for someone. This is our moment to hook you in. This is our moment not to disappoint you if you've been following us for the 28 years. And from the minute you arrive to the arena to the minute that you leave, it's really all focused on your experience. We are all in a customer service role. We are all trying to make sure that the fan, the player, the corporate partner has a great time. And that's working with the arena staff, that's working with the direct Liberty dedicated staff, that's working with the greater staff, the nearly 300 or 400 people who are operating a game on that day. For me personally, it's quarterbacking. It's putting out fire drills. It's putting out fires. It's looking ahead and trying to anticipate things that maybe drop balls throughout the course of the game. But most importantly, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day when everything runs smoothly and we get the W. But it really is about that customer service piece.
Give me a quick example of a dropped ball, something you catch that maybe others might not realize.
Oh, it could be something small. I'm sitting in a suite and the accent mark isn't on the Jumbotron on a player's name. Could be a home or an opponent. And I'm texting to the table, to the game pres, there's a mistake, there's no, it could be that small, but it matters to the player, it matters to the fan who really, really cares.
Not just a CEO, but a real-time copy editor. Oh my gosh, Keia. Excellent. Well, we're just about out of time, but before I let you go, just a few key takeaways of things that we learned today. We talked about how you have to cater to community in different geographies. Jess saying that where she's from in the Bay Area, it's the place where myths are made, but you want to combine that with being inclusive. Kim horrified me by letting me know the most sold drink in DC, my hometown, is water. But in other places, Miami, double Bacardi, maybe we should move to Miami. San Francisco wine, Long Island beer speaks to how different these fan bases are. Jess, user acquisition drives revenue, fans drive revenue, and so that's a priority to you leading up to launch. We are excited to see your brand and how it will be different from the men's team. And some of these stats, by the way, only 6% of medical science is based on women. They have been using small men. That is absolutely wild. This is why we need women, including yourselves, to be investing in this sport. Thank you three so much for joining us today.